And here we are talking about Matinee, a matinee in the evening, which is kind of strange. Um, we're talking about a movie that takes place on a Saturday afternoon, and we're discussing it on a Wednesday night live. And we are happy to have you here discussing Joe Dante's 1993 cult classic, I think it's fair to say, Matinee. A film that I must confess I was very excited about when it came out. I was 16, I think. And I love the poster. It's still got one of the great, most iconic posters of all time, I think. You can see a little bit of it in the background behind all of us right now. John Goodman above a matinee marquee with a giant fake ant coming out of the top of the building, and a nuclear bomb, nuclear mushroom cloud in the background, because this takes place during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it's about a man named Lawrence Woolsey, who's a kind of a schlock movie producer, who's bringing his latest film and his latest bit of sensory technology to a theater in Key West, Florida, when all hell breaks loose on the world stage. But I saw this. I think I saw half of this movie when it came out on video when I was 16 or 17, and I didn't like it, and so I didn't watch it until yesterday. Wow. On the occasion. Yeah, I know. It's one of those things I never went back to. I always meant to, but there's something about it, I left a sour taste in my mouth. I think I was expecting it to be something that it wasn't, and that just kind of bugged me. No pun intended, because we were talking about a film.
That was very funny.
Within a film called Mant, half man, half ant, all terror. But Shout Factory, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, just put out a 4K of Matinee this week. So I figured what better occasion to revisit a film that by all rights I should love. I love movies about movies. I love John Goodman. I love Joe Dante. So what was it that didn't work? And does it work now, some 30 plus years later? And I'm happy to report, guys, we're going to have fun tonight because Matinee absolutely does work. I don't know what was going on with me at 16. Maybe there weren't enough bloody bodies and nudity in it for my taste. But I'm on the Matinee train. And tonight, discussing it with me are two of Earth's mightiest critics, Jeff York of theestablishingshot.org and Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions, also the Spoiler Room podcast. And Jeff, you're also part of Pipeline Artists. So information for all your sites and stuff are going to be down below in the description. So folks, definitely check them out after the show. Or during the show, if you want to listen along while you're, reading some stuff, that's fine too.
Multitasking.
Yes. In fact, forget what I just said. Pay attention to us. We are the show. Jeff, I want to give a brief update. Last week, we did a bit of a benefit in honor of your mother, Barbara, who'd passed away. This Friday, when it's payday, because half these funds are coming out of my own pocket, we're going to be donating $40 to the Parkinson's Foundation.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much for that. I was very, very touched.
Well, happy to pitch in that way for a great cause. And folks should go back and check out that live stream from last week. It was for Inside Out 2, and I left a link to the tribute that you wrote to your mom in that description. It really is one of the most moving things I've read in tribute to someone. So well done, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about Matinee. We've got some Matinee fans here. I was not one of them until last night. But Mark, let's start with you, because you have watched the movie recently. You said you've seen it about a half a dozen times. So yes. I take it you're a fan. When did you first see it? What were your first impressions? And just briefly, why do you keep coming back to it?
Well, it's been a few years since I came back to it. So I was happy when I saw you were covering it. And like I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it on the show, but then I was like, I want to revisit it because I remember seeing this in the theater. I went to the theater to see it. I'm a big John Goodman stan. I always thought that, putting it in modern terms, but I've always been a John Goodman fan. I've always liked it, liked his performances. It was great to see him in a more leading role, because usually he is support. He's not usually at the top, but this appealed to me because growing up being raised on the B-50s horror, the schlock, for so many years from my dad and that and monster films, to see a film that even in the trailers looked like it was kind of an ode to it. And the fact that, Goodman is basically playing a castle character, without actually using his name, I'm like, oh, I'm in. And so I went to the theater, and it was actually better than I expected, because it was more than just a gimmick film. I didn't expect it to be, and we'll get into the spoilers. I don't want to give spoilers, but I didn't expect the backdrop of this film to be what it was, where it was set in. And that surprised me. And I'm a sucker for period pieces too. So, I mean, this just ticked a lot of boxes for me, and it appealed to me. And it's one of those movies, especially nowadays, you realize you don't get too many. This is a wonderful, spirited film that is, even when you get into the more tense moments, this has just got a wonderful positive energy to it. I mean, this is not to, lack of a better term, adorable film. This is an adorable film. This film doesn't take itself too heavy. There's some fun meta references, and it's a love letter to those classic schlock B horror films that usually get laughed at. And it definitely hit a lot of boxes for me that I didn't expect. And so after it, when it first came to video, I watched it a number of times, or if I'd catch it on cable, back in cable days, I'd watch it. I'd just stop and I'd watch it. And yeah, having revisited again made me love it all over again, and notice different things now than I did, when I was first watching it quite a bit. So
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely talk spoilers and some of those
Mhm.
the different elements that make this not just a Jeff, we'll get to you in a second, but I got to pull
Sure.
over for a minute. Mark, the other night on your show, we talked about a movie, Dark City from 1998.
Mhm.
And one of the things I was kind of complaining about was there's all this kind of nostalgia in the film for like the 1940s and kind of the noir aesthetic, but it all seemed to be signifiers without much substance. I didn't feel like the people who were paying homage to it really understood that these were movies that were not just fetish pieces, but actual like narratives that lived in
Right.
a very cool environment. The thing I loved about Matinee is, it was very clearly a nostalgia piece on the part of Joe Dante, but he really went far in trying to create early 1960s Florida. You can tell that he really dug into the movies that he was not even parodying, but paying homage to.
Mhm.
To the point where, much like Tim Burton did with Ed Wood, but I would watch the feature film version of Mant based just on the stuff we got in this movie, because it's kind of cheesy, it's very funny, but it's also an interesting kind of story that's different than some of the B movies that we may have seen from that time. So
Mhm.
yeah, we'll talk about all that. Jeff, first time watching Matinee, what did you think? And how many times have you seen it, if you can recall?
I think I saw it twice in the theater when it came out, probably once on cable, and then revisited it yesterday just to refamiliarize myself with it. But I'm liked it for all the reasons you mentioned, Ian. I think it's really a charming film, and I know it sounds like an old man saying this, but they don't make films like that anymore. I mean, it really is, this very kind and considered and thoughtful piece about children. I think it was coming off of the 80s, as I remember, was kind of a big heyday for movies starring a lot of little kids. I mean, I think it started with E.T. and Goonies and
Mhm.
things like that. And here, they aren't teenagers really; they're junior high, and they've got Lisa Jacob in there from Mrs. Doubtfire, and she was adorable in it, playing this sort of progressive kid in the early 60s. Duck and cover isn't going to help, which was really funny. I've forgotten how funny that scene was. But it was not only an homage, I think, to films and the sort of charm and showmanship, as Mr. Spector, the big producer played by Jesse White, says, of those kind of B movies, but also I think to sort of an innocence. This is before Kennedy was assassinated. It was kind of a big turn of events with the potential nuclear war suggested by the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was sort of our last gasp of innocence in a way, I think, before suddenly Vietnam and Watergate and assassinations and all those terrible things happened. But it really has respect for the children characters too, and doesn't sneer at them, and treats first kisses and kind of innocent romance and even getting to know somebody. I mean, I love the fact that I forgot about this, but the main character, who's really Gene Loomis, the young boy whose dad is in the submarine having to be part of the blockade as the missiles were moving into Cuba, worried about his dad's safety as well as his own. He's kind of a new kid in this new school and trying to make friends. And he not only makes a good friend with Stan, who's got sort of the B story, not the B movie, but the B love story with Kelly Martin, who you may remember from Life Goes On, playing kind of the top girl in school here. And they give that its time and attention too. And yet they are very serious about the Cuban Missile Crisis and what that was doing to Army families, or in this case, Navy family, and him trying to just make new friends and figure out where he stands in this new town. So I mean, there are a lot of cylinders, a lot of themes going on here, but they all, I thought, coalesced very well together, and it was funny as heck, and also kind of dramatic and really kind of gets you in the heart too. And I can't remember seeing, I mean, maybe Inside Out 2, which I missed last week, is one of those films that kind of works on those same planes, but they don't make them like this much anymore. And what a wonderful film. A lot of good character actors show up in it, a lot of good kid actors. It's a great star turn for Goodman. Kathy Moriarty, continuing with her sort of run of funny supporting female performances like this and Soap Dish. I mean, arguably she was pretty funny in Raging Bull too, but this was a good decade and two after that. But it was really, it was great to visit it again. I love that you're doing this on the show, Ian, because I think this is one of those films that is kind of a forgotten or hidden gem. It wasn't a big hit at the time, and it deserved to be. I think it was an unfairly missed film.
Yeah, it's weird because it's a Universal picture. It came out in 1993, the same year and the same studio as Jurassic Park. But that movie dominated everything that summer. Right. It was the summer of the dinosaur. But this would make kind of a good pairing, because that movie was all about like, what can you do to really wow audiences? Spielberg was he was at the cutting edge of digital effects and practical, and people went to the theater and they couldn't believe they were seeing dinosaurs stampeding across the screen. And Lawrence Woolsey had Atomo vision and all these kind of gimmicks. The kind of, you mentioned William Castle, the kind of the seat buzzers going on to Rumble Rama, that's right.
The seat thing.
or the disclaimers that they don't take responsibility if you get scared to death. I mean, so much stuff
that was real.
So much stuff that Lawrence does in here, that John Goodman's character does here, is what Castle did during the time. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ian.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was in my notes, but I think I had forgotten to mention it. So I'm glad, because I'm all over the place here tonight because there's so much to talk about. But I was thinking about this movie, even though I hadn't seen it. The idea of it has stuck with me for the last 3+ decades. When we were talking about the future of movies like 3 weeks or a month ago, I was thinking we need something like a Lawrence Woolsey type character or a gimmick or something to bring people back to the movies. I know the Music Box in Chicago, a theater I will never get tired of unofficially shilling for, but they had, was it last year or early this year? I think they've done it a couple of years in a row now. They've had some of those William Castle style movies, like one night only events, where they'll have the buzzers in the seats and have like special things going on in the theater that are complete audience surprises while showing these classic kind of B movies. And it just got me thinking, I wish I could have, I mean, minus the Cuban Missile Crisis part, I would have loved to have been around in that era to just go to the theater and not know what to expect. Even if there's a guy in a cheesy ant costume jumping out into the audience, you still have the people on the screen in the reality of the movie Mant looking at you and saying, he's right behind you. And then you look behind you and like, okay, oh my God, there is some kind of a creature running around and it's actually punching people in the audience. That wasn't part of the act though. But yeah, it's thrilling and fun. And, it really did surprise me, the amount of heart and the layers of the family dynamic that we definitely don't see, positively portrayed in the movies anymore. I'm going to pop on the spoiler banner here because we're going to get into it. But, as you mentioned, Gene's dad is, they're a Navy family. They're kind of military brats. They go all over the place, never staying in one place for very long. But his dad's on the blockade. His job is to, check out like Russian subs and or ships and board them and search for weapons, and hopefully not get everybody killed. At the end of the movie, I was expecting the tearful reunion. Oh, dad comes back home because the war is over. We don't get that. We get like a helicopter flyover where, Gene and Sandra are just kind of like on the beach. And like, what does this mean? I mean, what do you guys think it means? I was kind of puzzled by the final shot of the film.
I don't remember that being the final shot. In fact, I thought for sure they were going to have the dad show up and you get the hug or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that we all have to be a little careful no matter what time we're in, and maybe parallels and stuff like that. Or maybe this is the real kind of threat more than a Mant or any kind of B-movie creature. But yeah, it was a very odd. It almost felt like somebody spilled coffee on the original negative of dad hugging his son. And I guess we just end with a helicopter. We know he's in there. He's coming, isn't he?
If that's
I don't know.
That's even him, because there's nothing to indicate, like there's no shot inside the cabin of the helicopter, like, oh, there I think I see my boy on the beach, something like that.
Nothing. In fact, I'm surprised they just didn't end with him with Gene and Sandra just sort of wading into the water and watching it. That would have been a better thing, because they were kind of setting up that as the end anyhow. And I think they could have just been watching like, hey, that's my dad. And, they hold hands and they share this moment before, his whole world kind of coincides and lines up perfectly. But yeah, it was a weird end shot.
Well, the shot though, what it reminded me of watching it this time was shots that you would see of Homecoming, like a newsreel shot almost, which is what I think he may have been going for, is going to the boys coming home shot like it was a newsreel, because it's shot almost that way, as if you're seeing it through the news camera of the helicopters coming in and coming home, either from here or even what we used to see similar to like coming home from Vietnam or whatever in the helicopters. The way he did that, it doesn't bug me at all. I guess I didn't take it as quite as odd, because I wasn't expecting to see the dad at all, in all honesty, in this. Even when I watched it the first time, I did not expect to see the dad at all, because that was a bit of the point, in that he was being a soldier. He's kind of out of the picture for a lot of it. And I think to bring him in at the last moment wouldn't have that much of an impact as it could have, because he's only mentioned a few times, throughout. It's peppered in that his dad is out there and whatnot. But for me, I just took it as almost like a news shot, like a boys coming home, almost newsreel shot at the end.
The thing is, I think what I'm getting hung up on, and not in a bad way, I think it's a very interesting way to end the movie. And Jeff, I don't think you're criticizing it necessarily. It's just a bit of a puzzlement. But we've seen movies sort of like this before, where the dad is out of the picture or he's away, and he's mentioned, but then he either shows up at the end, it's a tearful reunion, or he dies, and that is a whole other kind of like a subplot, cascading thing of tragedy. I mean, in this movie, he's mentioned a few times. We see his picture, I think, in a couple of places, like on a mantle, and then at one point, Gene walks into the living room and he sees his mother watching kind of old movies of Gene when he's a little kid, and she's crying. And I'm like, oh my God, is this where she's going to tell Gene, oh, we got the letter today, or what? But you can tell she's lonely and she's scared, and she's got to support these kids, and she's hoping that her husband comes home. And you can tell that, they are a loving couple. There's no like bad domestic problems that have to be worked out or anything like that. It's purely about the love of the family unit. And I wasn't ready for that kind of degree of purity. And so at the end, when they end on this like lack of a conventional note, I thought it was cool, but I wasn't quite sure what it meant. And I think we're all kind of like, well, it could mean anything. So that's fine. I do want to say, thematically, this is something that I didn't pick up on until this morning when I was thinking back on the movie. Whether or not this was on Joe Dante's mind, and the man is a genius, so I'm gonna grant him this. But it could have been very much on the co-writers Charles S. Haas or Hahn, and his co-writer, one of the great names in show business. This guy should have a major career, Jericho Stone. That sounds like an alias. I'm on the run from coke dealers, so now my name is Jericho Stone.
Well, it was just coming out of the 80s, so he might.
I was going to say, sounds like an action hero. Like, when you're in trouble, you call Jericho Stone.
That does, yeah.
It's Jerry Bruckheimer's alias.
There you go.
No, but so I don't know if this
Cold.
is that was a different movie from '92.
That's right. Wasn't that Brian Bosworth? Oh my God,
Brian Bosworth for
like that, because somebody in Hollywood said, in the next action hero was that guy who's in football. What was he, a tight end or something?
I'm not going to make any judgments, but but no, back to my original point, which I was inartfully getting to. There was it's I'm sending us off the rails. Coke rails. There's a theme going on here tonight. There's something going on with color in this movie, and I'm going to give credit, and it's not just a coincidence, and it may be artsy fartsy, but damn it works. Early on, there's a lot of red in this movie. One of the first things we see is those bright red theater seats inside the movie theater. When Gene and his little brother Dennis go outside the theater and go home, I thought there was a problem with the 4K because it's so orange, red, and hazy out in Florida that I'm like, is something, but it was a deliberate choice because it doesn't look like that later on. And when we see Lawrence Woolsey, we first meet him, he's pulled over at a service station in this giant bright red car when he's postering over a van to go promote his appearance in his movie on Saturday. It's a giant red van that's an exterminator truck. At the end, after the crisis has been averted, we cut to Lawrence and his would-be girlfriend / soon-to-be bride, Ruth Corday, his muse even. He's in a bright blue like sailor's outfit, and they're getting into this pristine ocean-colored, like it looked like something like out of space, an ocean-colored convertible, and then they're driving way down the beach, and everything from that point on is just beautiful blue. So you're going from the red of danger and panic to the serenity of blue, and I thought, damn it, you talk about movies that they don't make anymore. I want to bring back thematic resonance and storytelling through visuals, iconography.
No, it's true. I mean, the color palette in this is very Italian. I mean, it's the red scare, it's danger, it's romance, and it's sort of setting up 3 or 4 different love stories kind of here. Even the one between Woolsey and Ruth, it's his leading lady. And how many times does the Mant claw go for her butt in it, which is hilarious. Even the dentist at the end, when William Shallert, the old, Gidget's dad and the old character actor from the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, suddenly the dentist has the ant claw too, and he's grabbing at her tuchus. I mean, it's a little, naughty in that funny kind of way too. But I love that. I love it when they have those kinds of, and the red ant, of course. I mean, the main costume, the bad kid, the delinquent who's dressed up, is also in a red ant costume. And even look at the legs on your poster there that you can see surrounding Mark are red. So but there's so many films that don't even bother to sort of think about the color palette or where the camera is positioned and what it says about power or who's got the advantage in the scene, et cetera, those kind of things that, filmmakers like Dante and those guys who were really kind of masters of all this kind of stuff really considered. I mean, Dante has done a very good job of thinking about design in most of his movies that would put most young filmmakers to shame today.
Well, I mean, you can go further with the color in this opening because they're in the theater and there's kind of a red tinge, almost a sepia type of feel to it when they're first in the theater. They get out of the theater, like you said, there's this red orange hue over everything. They don't know about the missile crisis yet, but which, by the way, IMDb changed your synopsis. The missile crisis was in 1961. You have this is taking place in 1962. Shame on you. Anyway, so there's the red, but the color changes as they get closer to home. So you have the red and the threat when they're outside of the fence. When they get into the fence of the base, when they're getting closer to home, the color gets a little bit more brighter 50s pastel, like the kind of standard almost 50s, not quite Asteroid City color, but that's similar. And then they get into the house, and in the house, all the colors vivid and bright, and it's 50s. And not only is this set in the 50s, but he shoots this like a 50s movie. The sets, at least in the beginning, the house set, looks like it's from a 50s lower budget film. This doesn't look like it's an actual house, and some of the other sets too, the coloring and everything. Once they get to the home, then your color balances out, and it stays that way for the rest of the film, but it changes as they get closer to home. And then when they're in the home, then it's all regular colors. All the color has been balanced and everything. And I thought that was an interesting thing that I didn't notice the first few times I watched it, because I was a lot younger, and I didn't pay attention to such things. But now looking at it, I'm like, that's brilliant, in that not only is it easing you into this kitsch of this 50s, but it's also implying that everything's a little bit better as he gets to home.
Yes. One point of correction, Mark.
Sure.
Cuban Missile Crisis was 1962.
62.
Oh, was it 62?
Yeah.
Well, then you're going to change the Wikipedia, because it says 61 in Wikipedia.
No.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
How dare they?
I barely.
They keep asking for our money, and yet that key date is wrong.
I barely remember my history, but according in Wikipedia, they had 1961, so it was throwing me off. So
we're experiencing a Cuban Missile Crisis.
We are
right here live on the show.
So my apologies. So I was
no. But I mean, it's a well taken point, because there's something that I don't know if this is because I was watching it in high definition or whatever, but there was a scene where Lawrence Woolsey is taking Gene kind of through the movie theater and sort of take him on as an apprentice. Yeah. And as they're going through the back, kind of like the yellowed hallways going up the stairs, there was just something about it. Didn't look like they were filming in a real location. It looked like a set, just the way that the walls were kind of painted. They're a little bit too perfectly grimy, and they looked like almost like the shadows had been painted on the angles. I don't know if that's the case, but it was just my perception of it. To add to your point, Mark, that kind of unreality of the whole production. Didn't mind it, but it just felt like this is its own kind of little world. It reminded me almost of the Joe Dante portion from the Twilight Zone movie.
It exactly reminded me of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, it's there's so much going on to digest as you watch it. It almost really demands a few viewings, because a lot of the character actors who pop up, whether it's McCarthy, of course, who is in both the Joe Dante version of in the Twilight Zone movie, but of course, infamously the original invasion of the Body Snatchers, and other actors from that time period, and references and stuff. The other thing too that's so funny, if I dare say so, that I remember being very humorous, but I don't remember running gags. And we've talked on this show a number of times about how there aren't running gags anymore in films, and they don't appreciate it. And the Blake Edwards and those people, there's a running gag in this, but it's coming from the Man film, where every time the sort of scientist who's bearded explains something, he will say his condition is accelerating. In other words, going fast.
Yeah.
And he every time he uses the big $8 word, he, as an aside, almost like he's used to it, explains like that means it's percolating or whatever. It's really funny, and it's a running gag, and they must hit that at least 6 times in the film, and I laughed every time. And it's just you sit there and go like, they don't do that in films anymore either, and it was so funny that they would do that.
They kind of do, Jeff.
Yeah.
Today, and I won't say much about it, but I did finally get around to watching Godzilla X Kong Hidden Empire. And I thought I was being punked. The amount of times that the action would just stop so that one character could spend 2 minutes explaining what was about to happen or why things are happening because the movie didn't bother to like tell the story.
Oh,
I'm
that's
like, where
hilarious.
are you getting this theory from? Why do you think that if you go through that portal, XXX is going to happen versus we might just get eaten by something?
Oh,
But
wow.
anyway, that's an aside. I'm just saying that the expository dialogue is still a thing, but
Right.
it should be more cleverly presented as
Yeah.
we see in Mant here.
Yes.
And Mark, for the record, I did not hate Godzilla X Kong.
Oh, well, that's good to hear.
It's
I'm
trash,
glad
but I had a good time.
I'm glad you. Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Just a little aside. There's not many people that I know who have watched Godzilla X Kong and go, "Oh my God, that's like Best Picture." No, everybody knows, including the filmmakers of Godzilla X Kong, exactly what type of film they're making, and they're seeing what they can get away with. And that's part of the reason and the appeal I love it is because they're making a ridiculous film, and just like they don't make films like Matinee anymore, we see few and far betweens where the filmmakers are genuinely making just a ridiculous film. They're aware completely of the ridiculous film, and they want to push just how far they can make this film as crazy as it is. And that's what they did with Godzilla X Kong, and I was there for it, but completely understand people, even those who hated it. I completely understand their angle, but they were tapping from some of those Showa era ones where you literally had Godzilla jumping and doing like hey or whatnot when he would defeat, or he would slide on his tail for his kick, which actually comes around to Matinee, to where they show some of these other cheesy movies. Like we get a fake cheesy comedy that's one of the ridiculous comedies, to where someone's uncle got turned into a shopping cart.
Look,
That's such a Disney parody.
The shook up shopping cart. I saw that on the marquee. I'm like, oh, that's the perfect title for like a Disney Nutty Professor type thing. But then they show it, and I'm like, this is amazing. This is attention to detail, and it's also a movie that I would legitimately watch. I believed that this movie existed, and help me out here, Naomi Watts showing up.
Yes, Naomi Watts.
Watts.
Like, almost a decade before her breakthrough role in Mulholland Drive, and that's maybe it might be her first credit. Who knows? But I couldn't believe that either. It's like, wow, that is hilarious.
And I love that. It's one of those things that it's a great reason to go back and watch the movie now, because back in 1993, you'd be like, oh, that you probably wouldn't even notice that actress because she was just like someone playing in a parody movie. But now you're like, wow, she's really good, and I understand why, because it's Naomi Watts. It's sidebar of the sidebar talking about Godzilla X Kong. I mean, Joe Dante was parodying the movies that were, he was a kid of this generation, or relatively so. He had a great affection for it. What are the movies? Are people going to be like making homages to Fast and the Furious 30 years from now? Are they going to look back on their childhood like, I want to recreate the experience of going to see Fast 6?
No,
what?
No, because those films are ridiculous in themselves, and they're self-aware ridiculous. There's a difference between the paying homage to a film that it was at the time trying to be at least something, and it's taken and it's morphed and accepted as something else than it is. It's just like, no offense, I support indie cinema. Everybody knows, they follow my channel. I love indie cinema. But when a film comes out and says the next cult classic, I'm like, you have completely lost the idea and the definition of what a cult classic is. You're paying homage to cult classics. That's awesome in your film. But don't call your own film a cult classic, because that immediately negates it as a cult.
Those movies should come with their own special rating called PTSA, which stands for Permission to Stay Away.
Go ahead,
but talking about nostalgia, something else. I've been thinking about Matinee all day, having watched it last night, really for the first time, and it reminded me of another film that I absolutely love that I hadn't caught up with until about 5-6 years ago, whatever the big anniversary was. It was Robert Zemeckis' first film, and it was called "I Want to Hold Your Hand." It was about a group of, it was mostly teen girls who wanted to go to the Ed Sullivan Theater to see the Beatles and their U.S. debut, and it's like it involves a record shop and boys, and it's a really funny, great character piece with all these wonderful character actors. You talk about like, oh, I can't believe this person was in the Matinee. You go watch that movie; it's got all these people before they were it, but it had that same kind of understanding of who and what teenagers are and how they act and what they want. It's very funny. It's very touching. It's kind of like screwball, but it felt very honest. And that's the vibe I got from Matinee.
Actually, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say towards the end, and it's just a point I want to make because I thought about it earlier. I don't want to forget it again.
No.
But at the end, it's Gene and what is the girl he ends up with, Sandra. They end up getting trapped in a bomb shelter that the theater owner has built underneath the movie theater, just in case. They get trapped in there, and they believe that the bombs have started falling and it is the end of the world. And all throughout the movie, there's been this kind of like the typical preteen, teenage, adolescent angst of like, sex and girls and boys and what does it all mean, and having this false confidence, but you kind of turn to jelly when you actually go talk to someone of the opposite sex. But the boys are always very big up on, talking each other up and like, oh, I bet there's one line, hey, if you think the world was going to end, do you think she'd do it with me? That kind of bravado, right?
Yes.
At the end, they're having serious conversations about like, what if it's up to us to repopulate the world? Like, what does that mean? They're having a serious this Adam and Eve, this serious conversation, and it's touching and it's scary. It's not really funny. It's kind of charming in a weird way, but you're like, you really are in that moment with them because we have a sense that the world isn't ending, but we can also feel how they would feel that because the balcony is about to collapse because there's too many kids up there. There is danger imminent in the theater. It's just not the kind of global danger that everyone's expecting.
What I love about the way Dante directs it, and it's interesting you mentioned Zemeckis. I think those two guys started out as these kind of sweet-natured satirists. Where that's been sort of lost. At least we don't get many filmmakers like that today. Maybe Wes Anderson's the closest we have to that in a way. But to your very point of not only treating the Cuban Missile Crisis seriously and worrying about like, well, what if we have to repopulate the earth? And they're not laughing at those kids having that conversation in that scene, which I love because, we would have been probably invited by today's, Disney Channel TV shows to laugh at kids and think they're all being ludicrous and but the other thing that I think was very impressive that Dante did in that scene as well is the first kiss that both of them share, and then it turns into a second kiss and then a longer kiss, and when they finally open up the door, they're still canoodling, and it's not turned into something vulgar or dirty or, oh, he's going for it and forgot all about the problem outside. It's this sweet connection between these people who are kind of reaching out to each other in sort of a depressive state. And this is sort of the one sweetness and maybe positivity that they've got in this difficult moment. And he doesn't rush it. He doesn't waste the emotion. He builds on it and lets it take its time. I don't know if you'd see that done in a movie today on those many different kinds of tasteful, quality, character-driven, kind levels.
Well, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark, please.
I was just going to say it's what Ian touched on, and what you're talking about too, Jeff. Is, and we've talked about it before in other films where they have kids. The kids are actually treated and portrayed like kids in here. They aren't overblown stereotypes. I mean, his young brother acts like young brother. The one girl, her brother blackmails her into taking him to the movie because she found his love letters to her. They say he was in jail. He was in juvie, but but at the same time, those were situations that were handled just to the edge, or like you said, with the kiss in the bunker. A lot of times, especially nowadays, the parents would like, oh, what are you kids doing? Oh, get out of here. Oh, you're so in trouble or whatnot for being young kids who think the end of the world is, and they're caught being, just holding each other. And in this, the parents just kind of like, okay, let's go. Like they roll. It's like they don't make
They
it.
aren't shamed.
Thank you. That's the
They're not
word.
shamed.
That's the word I was looking for. They
Mhm.
aren't shamed, but at the same time, you don't have the dad elbowing him like, "Hey, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
Chip
you know,
off the old block.
you know, the most you have is John's character. You know, the director kind of just giving the kid a little bit of a, yeah, you know, doesn't look like you had that bad of a time in there, you know. But it was done. It's done so, handled so much with care in this whole film that it's one of those things where you're looking at these kids as people and not as kids.
Mhm.
And I think not many filmmakers, but you even had that even in the Twilight Zone. You know, Joe Dante does that well. You wouldn't think the name Joe Dante, but Joe Dante does that well, like Zemeckis.
Or Gremlins.
Or Gremlins. They
Yeah.
handle
Very
kids
good with kid actors.
characters appropriately to where they're people. They are
Mhm.
individuals. They aren't just, you're a kid, act like a kid. And I think that's part of the appeal too, is that you look at these people as people, not just as, oh, they're an
Yeah.
8-year-old kid. Oh, there's a
Right.
12-year-old
Well,
kid.
I think,
Oh,
yeah, I think the younger brother that you mentioned, Sandra's younger brother, or no, it was Sherry's younger brother.
Sure, yeah.
With the blackmail kind of the letters thing.
Right.
That was the closest you get to a
Yeah.
cartoon, kind of like the bratty little brother kind of thing. But you know, it's a very small part of the movie, and it really is just a plot device, so that he ended up at the theater at the same time that Stan, who was supposed to be. It is a great, like, God, I love the details in this movie.
Mhm.
Stan gets visited by the reform school bully Starkweather,
Yeah.
who still has a crush on Sherry. He fancies himself a poet, but he's like a greaser with a leather jacket and everything. He threatens Stan, like, if you see her again, there's going to be trouble. So Stan has to break the date with Sherry. And what does he say? It's not like, oh, I'm washing my hair, or my parents make me take up the trash. He says, I'm going to be piling up sandbags at the school in the event of nuclear holocaust.
By the all-purpose room.
I'm saving the world. Sorry.
Right. But it's still, I
That's
mean,
the
you can
express
see,
event.
but that phone call, you can see that he doesn't want to have to lie to her because he really likes her, but he's
Mhm.
also kind of afraid. And there's all these different levels of things going on just in that phone call scene. That, yeah, it's any one of these subplots would make for its own movie. And you can rarely say that about, you know, movies nowadays. I want to pull over, guys. I'm going to take a pause in the conversation, although I think it's a really good one, to take a look at the boatload of comments that we've got.
Mhm.
David Wilt revisiting us once again. Thank you for joining us. Matinee kind of sounds like a parody movie because it takes on those classic 1950s type movies. Yes, it does feel like that, but it totally isn't. In fact, I wouldn't even say that Mant, the movie within a movie, is a parody.
No,
Really,
it's
it's a straightforward homage. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a pretty close facsimile.
That's what this film is. It's an homage. It's not a parody because it's not making fun of it.
Mhm.
It's showing tribute to the film, because you can
Mhm.
tell Joe Dante just has a love for this type of film. It
Mhm.
comes through so much in this.
And
Mhm.
I think one of the clues to that is, you know, he's amplifying.
Mhm.
When we've all seen the trailers for these 50s and 60s B movies with the kind of like the swirling text that comes out at you, and it's all very
Yes.
sensationalistic. Dante does his own version of it. I guess the screenwriters maybe had input in this, but early on when they're talking about they're selling Mant in the trailer, it says, a film so terrifying it can only be described in screams.
I love that. That's like the best tagline.
That's a great line. It really is.
I want that on a t-shirt.
It's a brilliant line. So true.
Yes. And David also says, do you know that the Mant trailer, when Lawrence Woolsey introduces himself, that is actually a spoof from the
Yes.
trailer of Mr. Sardonicus, in which William
Yep.
Castle introduces himself. I did not know that,
Mhm.
but my guests do, so I'm the one missing out. Thank you, David. In the movie Gremlins 2, there's also a scene which makes it look like Gremlins have taken over the cinema. They have Hulk Hogan scolding the Gremlins and ordering them to run the rest of the movie. Now, that is something that, you know, another Joe Dante film.
Oh.
And that was that was a couple years before Matinee. So maybe that was
Yeah.
some kind of inspiration for this. But I remember, did you guys see Gremlins 2 in the theater? I assume you did.
I
I
saw
did.
it
I saw it
theater.
with my girlfriend
Yes.
at the time. We
Oh,
were the only two in the theater, and we were howling. It was hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
and the story behind that I read was that the studio was pushing for a sequel and he didn't want to do a sequel. So he said, okay, if I get to do a sequel, I get creative control. They gave him creative control, and he made a total satirical parody
Oh,
of
it was-
his first film, and it's freaking hilarious.
But
What's
also
even
a parody of Cable,
and a
you know,
parody
which
of
was
Cable. Yeah.
big at the time, and like cooking shows and weird talk
Yeah.
shows. Oh, and even the John Glover character is kind of a
Wham.
riff on Trump.
Oh yeah.
And-
Clamp, boom. The logo's a big C that looks like it's a vice grip, you know.
What
It's a vice grip, and it's got the world in that
In
grip, and the
in
world
the
has been
grip.
smushed to
Yeah,
like an
yeah.
oval because
That's
he's
right,
like
that's
taking
right.
it over.
and it's got
Oh
a
my God,
spinning,
it's
it's a spinning
hilarious.
logo in front.
It's
But
fantastic.
but also with Gremlins 2, they do that gimmick in a different way for the video release.
Yes.
So the video release, in the part where Hogan's in the theater, in the video release, you get snow, and they have a whole nother montage of different like old westerns and that where they've got the gremlins in it, and it's beautiful that they changed that gimmick specifically for the video release, and I love it. I love that they gave it that thought.
How about the film where the film breaks in Gremlins 2 and the two gremlins start doing shadow puppets?
Yeah.
And they become so elaborate that they could never possibly do those with those claws. I mean,
Look.
we were pounding the pavement. It was so funny. I think it's maybe the most unappreciated and missed comedy in the history of cinema, because I was howling the entire time. I watched that about 2 years ago, and I was still howling.
I watched it recently for probably an anniversary or something too. But I just remember being in the theater. This gets back to the Lawrence Woolsey thing. I wonder if that's where Dante got the inspiration to take on Matinee. But I remember being in the theater with my dad. It was a bit more crowded than the way
My
you saw it, Jeff. There was more than people in the theater. But I remember people getting antsy when the film because it did the whiteout, the burn,
Yes.
everything looked like it had been messed up. And then you see the Gremlins con, like, oh, okay, he did it just enough to make you think there was actual technical failure.
Yes.
The only thing I think that kind of matches that, and I got to give credit because it's not so much the movie as the way it was presented by Mr. Steve Procopi. Years ago, I got to see an advanced screening of Tropic Thunder.
Oh,
And
nice.
as you remember, that movie opens with 4 like fake trailers starring
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
stars
yeah.
in the film. Steve comes out. This is when he was working for Ain't It Cool News as Capone at the time. And he comes out and introduces, hey, everybody, here's that new movie, Tropic Thunder, with Ben Stiller and Robert Downey Jr. You're going to love it. It's great. But the studio has sent some trailers that have never before been seen for movies that are coming out. No one has seen these yet, so enjoy. And the lights go down, and the trailers start, the fake trailers, and that's when, because it was the way it was presented was we're going to see something legitimate, and these crazy out of whack fake trailers. By the time we realized what was going on, half of them were over, but it just helped that enjoyment even more because the wool, or the Woolsey, had been pulled over our eyes. It was phenomenal, and that's what I'm saying. We need to bring this spirit back to the movie going. It's hard to do in a kind of a soulless Cineplex environment, but there's got to be ways to do it to make it more lively and interactive.
Well, didn't you think it was funny too how the Mr. Spectre character played by Jesse White, who's sort of the big executive, comes in, and when he says like, just get rid of that balcony, you can put more, in fact, put a couple more screens up. It's like, wow, that's where the cookie cutters, Cineplexes started to come in. So they're making a little fun of that. But you're right. There's so much wit throughout this, and charm, and even in some of the throwaway stuff. Like there's a brief moment early on when there's the Woolsey trailer, and he's got the cigar and silhouette. It's very funny, but he talks about it, he goes like, and it's all true as proven by many magazines, and he just
and he just waves the magazine.
And you can't even read a single title. And I mean, it's just a throwaway bit, and yet it's hysterical. It's so funny. Many magazines.
But and we'll
Look,
get
it's
back
a
to
fan.
right. We'll get back to the comments in a second, but I just want to pull over and talk about, John Goodman. He's so good in this movie.
Oh,
And
so good.
he plays the layers of Lawrence Woolsey, because this guy could be a total like Weinstein, scummy poonhound kind of like, casting couch guy. But you get the feeling he doesn't have the creativity of Ed Wood. He's not like really he's a movie producer. I don't know if he's directing Mant, or it seems like he's just producing these films.
Yeah.
It's mostly producing, yeah.
Right. But you get the feeling that he really loves the audience. He loves the thrill. He loves the art of motion pictures as much as he understands it. But he's a showman, and his personal life is a mess. But all it takes is one gas station attendant to ask for his autograph and say, "You're the guy that makes those scary movies." He's like, "Yes." And it completely turns his mood around. But he's not, being condescending or like being the big man. He's legitimately kind of touched by it. And even when the kid says, "Thank you, Mr. Hitchcock,"
he takes that pause and he still signs it though. He doesn't crush the kid's dreams or throw it in his face or whatnot. He's just like, yeah, it figures.
But you know what? We don't see what he signs, but I wouldn't be surprised if he signed it like Alfred Hitchcock.
Like, I'm sure.
Because he starts writing, so it's probably like he got through the too Richie part or whatever, and then the guy's like, "Thank you, Mr. Hitchcock," and he's like, "Fine, Alfred." Okay, so let's see. David also says, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but there was a horror movie in the 90s that also took place in a movie theater called Popcorn. I've never seen Popcorn. Was it any good?
Popcorn's amazing. If you talk to a lot of
it might be a little bit of an oversell.
Okay,
but go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
Many critics thought this was amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't oversell it. As a fan, it was a lot of fun. And if you go to a lot of horror circles and groups and talk or mention Popcorn, you will get many people who come out and go, they love that movie. It is a similar style in horror. It's a send up to horror. It's got its gore. It's its own movie, but yeah, it takes place at a movie theater. And I remember seeing it, and I've got the movie poster for it. It's got a wonderful movie poster. And
the only thing I know about Popcorn is that I think Tom Villard was in it, and I remember him from One Crazy Summer. Anyway, let's see. I gotta check that out at some point. Well, it's I think that was 1990, so I'll wait a few more years and be able to do its 40th anniversary. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, don't stop. Just stop there, please.
I will stop reciting the ages because, man, there was a movie out in 2009 called Alien Trespass that also paid homage to 50s sci-fi movies. Did I see that? It sounds like an Asylum movie. Like it sounds like a parody of Covenant or something. Alien Trespass. But no, I don't think I've seen that. Okay. Stephen Hyder, can you talk Mant and the actors in it? The fact that Dante took the time to make another original movie for Matinee, also its connection to William Castle. Love the show. Well, thank you. We love the comment, Stephen. I don't know if you joined late. We did kind of talk about, or maybe talked around Mant, and one of the things we appreciate about it is the movie within a movie, which typically is you get just enough to get the point across. Maybe it's a parody, but I said I would watch a full-length version of Mant because it is so compelling and original and strange. One of the things I loved about it is it's almost a comedic conceit because it's like The Fly. It's the man and he's got the giant ant head and his arms start changing. But initially, he's got the giant ant head, but he still has the human hands and he's just talking like,
and the human voice.
Right, the human voice like, "Oh, Doc, you tell me I'm going to be like this," almost like a Seinfeld kind of like a neurotic thing going on. And at the end, he's gone full like Brundlefly, and he's climbing up buildings and like throwing cars around and stuff. But it is a real kind of movie. It's pretty spectacular.
What I love about the whole Mant thing is the text on the poster is a replica of the text on the poster of Them, which is about giant ants. The first shot with him having the ant head is an homage to The Fly, the original as well. So, I mean, he nails all of these points and he replicates them with his own little variation. And if you're a fan, you don't have to be a fan of the movie to appreciate the scene, but if you know where these references are coming from, it's suddenly that extra layer for the fan watching Matinee to appreciate even more what has gone into it. And he's got legitimate posters in there. You've got that, what is it, the Confessions of a Opium print
Yes.
with Vincent. I mean, so talk about a deep cut poster, something that you wouldn't see. I saw it in the back, go, holy crap. And he's got a couple others too of posters you don't normally see when they're 50s homages. They pick more popular ones, and here he's got some obscure posters in here.
See, I want to see that movie as well, Ian, because it escalates. I mean, it goes from parodies of like The Fly to them, and then it kind of becomes the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman and some of those kind of things. But they also have some killer lines in that. I mean, one of the funniest lines is when Ruth, played, of course, she's his muse, his nurse in the lobby, as well as the main actress who keeps getting grabbed in the hiney. But at one point she says to her husband, "Oh, Bill, if you could just listen to the man in you and put the insecticide." And he goes, "Insecticide? Where?" I mean, that's such a great fun. And you can almost see it coming, but when it comes, it's still freaking hilarious. Oh my God.
Yeah, you're right. And I want to go back to the movie posters for just a second, because it kind of picks up on what you were saying, Jeff. I mean, there are funny moments in the movie within a movie, but not everything in Matinee or even in Mant is a gag.
Right,
because it would have been very easy for Joe Dante to get his set designer or the art department to say, make up some cheesy looking 1950s B movie posters I can have in the back, like the Attack of the 50-Foot Shoelace or whatever. But no, they are legitimate posters for movies that some of which I hadn't heard of. There was one, I assume it's a real movie, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. I think that was one that we see or something like that. I'm like, what is that movie? I want to go check it out. I don't know if it's any good or not, but I love The Day the Earth Stood Still. Is The Day the Earth Caught Fire completely different? Is it an Asylum style riff on Earth Stood Still? I don't know, but I got to find out.
Did you also catch that you had Kevin McCarthy show up in there as the general? In sorry, you keep thinking of Mant, and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I liked that, because I was thinking back to his cameos in other Joe Dante movies, because of course you've got, that guy Dick Miller showing up. He's in every Joe Dante
he's in
thing.
every Dante film, yeah.
But Kevin McCarthy, he was in the Twilight Zone, the movie. He was in Matinee, and he was also in Gremlins, but he was just on TV because Billy Peltzer was watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So that's how you get your stealth cameo, your cameo once removed, I guess. I want to say, there is some really touching stuff between Woolsey and Gene, as I kind of mentioned earlier, talking about the history of movies and storytelling. There's a great shot where they're kind of walking around town. They come to a brick wall, and Woolsey is talking about the cave drawings, and they see this picture of a mammoth on a cave. And it's just kind of the way they communicated with each other. But then they sensationalize it. The mammoth has big teeth, and it's going to come and attack everyone. And this primitive cave drawing becomes this beautiful kind of animated cartoon. And from there, they get into talking about, the movies and conflict and what's going on out in the real world. And Woolsey at one point says, millions of people looking over their shoulder, curious about when God's other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah.
Like that's chilling. And also when he and Ruth are driving away in the car at the end, they're talking about, well, we've avoided this crisis, but what do you think is going to come next? And it's so strange watching this in 2024, thinking about a movie that came out in 93, referencing an event from 62. Because Lawrence Woolsey says, well, there's going to be something coming up next that's going to freak people out, and the world is going to be on the precipice once again. We don't know when that's going to be. I don't remember exactly how the whole speech went, but it felt like it was capturing the zeitgeist of 2024. Because where are we now? We are on the brink of war, possibly with Russia, and there's all these weird players on this world stage, and we're not quite in duck and cover territory, partially because we're distracted by these lovely devices and things like live streams on a Wednesday night. But you think about how strange that is to hear in 2024 and think back to, well, this was 93. I mean, the 1990s, there were conflicts in other parts of the world, but they were very much over there. We didn't have that global consciousness that we did now, and a lot of people say that was kind of to our detriment. But it's like Joe Dante was capturing this nostalgia and the warning that Woolsey was trying to give to the audience, but it was a warning that wouldn't be really necessary for 30 years after the movie that he was making about about a situation from 30 years prior.
Ian, can
I
I
don't
just
know what
interject?
I don't know what it all means. Yes, Jeff, save me from rambling.
No. You're rambling well. I love it. There's also a great, some great dialogue that Lawrence Woolsey has too at the end, when I thought, shoot, AMC should actually use that instead of Nicole Kidman talking about like somehow pain feels good in a place like this. What? But he's talking to the theater staff beforehand, kind of getting them revved up, and he goes, but I want you to look at the faces out there during this picture. There's going to be room in their heads for only one thought. Don't let it get me. But they know we can't hurt them, but they're still going to be scared half to death. And all of you, when you thread the projector, when you tear the tickets, when you sell the jujubes, you're all a part of it. And just when it gets the worst, when they're sitting there and their hearts are going like trapped animals out here in the dark, we save them. And they say, hey, it's all right. Thank God. Hey, can I see that again? And then he says, P.S. No, they can't. We clear between shows.
Yes.
But that's a great sort of summation of like, we sort of hand our heads and hearts over to this experience, and then we are taken to the brink and saved, and all is well. But then we want to do it again. It's kind of like a roller coaster, I suppose.
You want to talk about something to replace the AMC thing? Just Woolsey's talk with our hero, basically our main character, about coming into the theater and walking up the old 200-year-old, as he put a 200-year-old carpet, and coming up and the candy's laid out, and then you don't know what's behind the door. And then when you open it, he's like, we're here. What do you have for me? I mean, I loved that whole little segment. And what I also love is, if anyone had question of Woolsey's true intentions throughout this whole thing, that squashes anything outside of Woolsey likes to entertain and he loves film. Yeah, he's a showman, but not a con artist. Yeah. He does a gimmick, but it's different than a con artist, because he's being upfront about what they're doing.
He's delivering. A con man doesn't deliver. That's the con. He fakes you out. He's
not. You're right. He's not a con man, but he does. I feel like he's a reformed con man or something.
Oh yeah.
There is this one beautiful touch when Woolsey and Ruth and the theater owner guy, the franchisee dude, they're standing at the back of the theater, because Woolsey's like, I have to impress this guy, because if he loves Mant and what we do here, we can get into his chain of theaters and make all this money. They're standing at the back. There's a row of teenagers sitting right in front of them, and one of them has a tub of popcorn. There's a girl next to him.
Yes.
Woolsey reaches down. He flicks the kid's ear. Yes. He kind of like turns to the girl, and
because he thinks it's her.
He thinks it's her.
Saddling up to him, and
Woolsey reaches over the other side and scoops out some popcorn. Just starts eating it. I mean, it's just
and he offered some,
but it's so fun. Oh yes, he offered it to.
He shares it. Yeah,
he goes corn, and the other guy's like, oh yeah.
He just calls it corn too. Was that a thing back in the early 60s?
Woolsey at one time was a car salesman. I think he was, but he didn't like what he was doing. But he likes film, and that's why he got into this business of producing. I think that's just what I'm saying. He's got that personality, but there's a genuine honesty to him that, again, embodies the whole heart of this film. Is honesty. This film is being honest about its love toward what it's portraying. It's not making fun of. It maybe is poking a little and showing it, but at the same time, it's doing it with such love, and you can just feel that the whole thing is handled with respect. Even it's something that you could tell the filmmaker loved. He loves this thing. And he also recognized how crazy this thing is, and that's what I really love about it. Him talking about being scared, and then how people are done and they're happy because, watch with your eyes open. I love that whole theme. That he does.
The whole idea of like explaining why people like to be scared, or they love scary movies. I loved that at the end, the whole the movie screen bursts open and bursts into flame, and in the back you can see an atomic blast happening, and that's how they get everybody to leave the theater. They have to leave the theater because the balcony is about to collapse. But it's such a weird moment because I'm thinking, okay, I know there's not a nuclear bomb going off, but where did that atomic blast come from? I'm disoriented and I want to leave. It creates that weird sense of panic in the audience. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I wouldn't be able to sit there in the theater and say, oh, that's just a nuclear blast projected on a screen. It's a genuinely strange, confusing moment. I just want to get out of there. When you see Woolsey kind of turning it off, later, it's like, yeah, well done. We talked about the scene in the bunker where the two kids are making out and then they get kind of rescued. That is followed by a really harrowing scene that I think underscores the great family dynamics in this movie, where Jean reaches out and saves Dennis from a collapsing. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Mark, I didn't mean to bump you off. I was trying to get rid of this comment here. I wanted to show more of you. I didn't. Wow, that was weird.
I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm done now. All right.
No, I apologize. Too many things to look at. But no, when Dennis he's the last kid on the balcony that's about to collapse, and Jean reaches out for him, and he's on the precipice. They're both like leaning as far out as they can, but there's so much love between these brothers. It's not like the typical older brother, bratty younger kid. They're kind of like teasing and bullying each other. There's a lot of sensitivity here, especially because they both know that dad is gone and we hope he's coming back, and we have to be kind of the men of the house because mom is also on edge. So when they're reaching out for each other, I knew in the back of my mind that there's no way that Joe Dante in the last reel of this cockamamie picture is going to actually kill the adorable little brother. But it's kind of like Toy Story 3 in that climactic moment. You're like, but he could melt these toys. He could have something horrible happen to this little boy, but no. And when he reaches out and they take hands and, Dennis kind of swings to safety, still hanging off the metaphorical cliff, I was relieved and I got a little bit welled up. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, you're onto something there, Ian. I think one of the things that Spielberg was very famous for early on doing, and I think a lot of these directors did, is they respected the family too. Like, mom is not played as a schmuck here.
No.
And even in Gremlins, when she corners Frances Lee McCain, corners the one in the microwave oven, she's battling for her life. And we're not sneering at her like, oh, she's a dumb mom and all this. No, we're cheering mom on. And in fact, when the Gremlin goes, it gets one of the biggest cheers because, and I love that about it. Like, even the mom here, like her moment when she's watching the home movies and stuff like that. And even the very progressive parents are treated as not comic ridicule people, but just, they're a little ahead of the game where some of these other people maybe not so much. Real respect for the family unit and what parents are. They're not sneered at. They're not dumb, who like clueless fools that so often they're played in commercials and shows and everything else today.
Well, also, talking about Sandra's parents, there's something even going on there because they are kind of freewheeling. You get the feeling that they're like real Kerouac readers. They're not like
she calls them by their first names.
Yes. Right. Yeah. But they're not like the hippies where they're swinging and doing all sorts of like weird stuff. They're just very free spirits. They're trying to figure out this parent thing. But yes, you're right. They're on the first name basis with their daughter. But we see that the other kids kind of think she's kind of weird, and maybe that's kind of cool that she's got so much freedom there, and she's the girl that can, protest the duck and cover drills. But when Jean first talks to Sandra, their first couple of interactions together, you get the feeling that she's not comfortable with her parents. She wishes she had that structure, that guidance. It's cool that they've opened up her mind in a lot of ways, but also she's still just a little kid. And they don't make a big deal out of it. It's just something that you can kind of unpack on your own time, which I really appreciated.
But we also saw you that these parents, as free as they are, they're still parents, because at the end, when they find out that she's trapped in the bunker, they suddenly kick into parent mode. They're not just the cool progressive people anymore. The one mom goes, where are they? And she goes rushing in, the dad right after, like an actual concerned parent, which I love because it gives them another layer going, oh, they aren't just, yeah, okay, well, she's trapped, she'll be all right, boom, they kick into parent mode.
I also love that the dad was played by, where is he? David Clennon, who might recognize from The Thing. You got to be fucking kidding me.
Yes.
And this was many years after he played Miles Drentel, the boss of the young ad guys in 30 something.
Well,
in the 80s, he played Miles Drentel, the head of the ad agency
that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Michael and Elliot worked for, right?
I got to confess, the only thing I knew about 30 something was that Timothy Busfield was in it, because I was like, that's the guy from Revenge of the Nerds.
Yes.
Yeah. No, my mom watched it.
I should watch 30 something. I should go back and watch that. Yeah. I feel like I could appreciate it now because I'm old. But, I was like 11 when that show came out, and like, what's a yuppie? All right.
We didn't mention. We just have to mention, if you don't mind, real quick. One, we get Dick Miller in here, who is we get Dick Miller and Robert Picardo in here.
Picardo's great.
I love Robert Picardo. I always love in a movie, because I was first introduced with him to Voyager, like many people. That was probably one of the more widespread things.
Not even the Wonder Years?
I didn't remember him in the Wonder Years that much.
He was the gym teacher.
Yeah. Well, but he's one of those character actors that you forget. So I recognize, because I was a big Trekkie, and he was a main part in Voyagers as the hologram doctor. And then going back to these films that I love, I'm like, oh shit, Picardo is in this and in this, because he was such a great actor that you didn't see Robert Picardo, you see whoever he's playing. You forget, even though he looks fairly the same, like Dick Miller. You that's Dick Miller, but at the same time, it's like, which again, you have Dick Miller in here, kind of in the 60s film, like he was in another film. Only he's not a killer in this one, but
there should have been a bucket of blood poster in that.
There should have been a bucket of blood. There should have been a bucket of blood.
Sidebar.
John Sayles was in it too.
Yeah, I saw he was credited as Bob. Who was Bob?
He was one of the plants who were protesting.
Was he the other guy?
Yeah, he was the other guy.
That's John Sayles, a fellow indie filmmaker. So that was kind of a nice little touch too.
I just finished reading Matthew McConaughey's book, and he very briefly mentioned working on Lone Star with.
It's a great movie.
Yeah,
I picked up the Cliff Notes. I picked the Cliff Notes up of McConaughey's book. All it just says is all right for like 50 pages. So that's all it is.
Green Lights is a great
long way to go for that joke.
It was a long trip. A long trip.
And Mark, if and when you ever read the origin of all right, you're gonna eat those words. It's no longer funny. It's really cool. Anyhow, it's also kind of funny. But no, my sidebar was going to be, and I'm talking about going a long way for a joke. If someone out there hasn't done this, they should make a YouTube version of like Star Trek Picard, but you replace Patrick Stewart with Robert Picardo and call it Star Trek Picardo.
Yeah. Wow. And then you thought mine was a long trip.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I am not proud. Okay. Last comment of the night, then we're going to get out of here. It's from Petty. Welcome back, sir. Hi, guys.
Thank you.
Jeff, my condolences for your mother,
so nice.
And I send a big hug for you. Yes,
thank you. And thank you for your lovely comment last week, too. I saw that expression of love. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you, Patty. Thank you.
Yep. We have the best fans.
Do.
And the best panelists. This has been a lot of fun. Mark,
before you end, I just want to let David Wilt know, if he's not aware of it, there's a number of films out there still that are homages. There's one that I've watched a couple of times called The Lost Skeleton of Cadavara. And it is totally a sci-fi 50s send up. It's done in black and white. It's got the cheesy effects with a skeleton and whatnot. And the tagline is, "This is the day the earth was disemboweled in terror." And it was filmed in the miracle of Skeletorama, a new screen wonder of the age. So yeah, it goes along with Matinee. People are still occasionally making these.
Disemboweled in terror.
Yeah,
not quite as good a line as the one that you want on the T-shirt, Ian.
No. This came out in 2004, and I've had it because I watched.
I'm constipated. I've been sitting here an hour. I think it's Argentina. It won't pass.
What?
Take my wife, please. Okay, let's go.
Okay.
I think that is a good note to end on. Except for there was a line, "You can't drop an atomic bomb on Chicago," which I was that made me stand up, take notice. I'm like, wait, what? And please, no one do that. But anyway, gang, I want to thank you very much for hanging out and talking. Oh, wait. Oh, hold on. Betty's got a. He's laughing. He's laughing.
Oh.
Thanks, but no, I want to thank you for hanging out and talking Matinee. I'm very glad that I had occasion to watch it because it really is kind of a classic movie. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. The first part was still kind of rough going for me, honestly, because of like, it felt like it took a little bit of a while to find its rhythm. Maybe it's because I was used to more conventional stories about kids and teens, and this is not really that I just wasn't kind of ready for it. But next time I watch it, I will be, and there will be a next time. Thanks in part to Shout Factory, who has put out a 4K version of Matinee, which you can pick up. Again, shameless, non-sponsored plug, but it's a great film. But anyway, gang, what are we going to be talking about next week? What can you guess? A Quiet Place. Day one. Yeah, so it's part 3, day 1. It's gonna be a prequel. I can't wait.
No critic screening for it.
What? That's always a good sign. So yes, join us back here next Wednesday, July 3rd. It'll be July 4th weekend. We'll be celebrating our independence by talking about A Quiet Place prequel. But yeah, 8 p.m. Central. We'll see who shows up to talk about that one. And in the meantime, I would like to thank Earth's Mightiest Critics, Jeff York from the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists, Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room and Special Mark Productions. I have always been, I guess, Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. And yeah, thank you all for hanging out. We got Steve and David and, of course, Petty. We appreciate you talking movies with us in the chat. You out there, what did you think of Matinee? Did you like it? Did you love it? Are we completely crazy for being mad about this and other Joe Dante films? Leave your comments down below and we'll read them and maybe discuss them on a future episode. But until next time, oh, by the way, like, subscribe. You know, there's a few people watching right now. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you haven't liked the stream, please do that. If you do, in fact, like the stream. And yeah, until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care. Oh, and yeah, movies are back, I guess, because of Inside Out 2. But they could be even more back if we adopted more of the Lawrence Woolsey philosophy. That's all I'll say.
Showmanship.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Petty gets the absolute last word. Bye.
Oh.